Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. You're joining us live for Pope Francis's Marian prayer with Diocesan Clergy in Marseille's Basilica of Notre de la Garde. That's Our Lady of the Garde. Wherever you're joining us from, I would like to welcome you on behalf of Vatican Media to this worldwide telecast and wish you a very happy Friday.
Some of you may be joining us through various Vatican Media channels, perhaps the Vatican News live events, or the Vatican Radio app, the Vatican News English web portal, YouTube channel, or Facebook live feed. And to all of you joining us through our various media partners, welcome. These are Salt and Light TV, EWTN TV, Atmadashan TV India, Shalom World Television Networks USA, Catholic Faith Network, Catholic TV, and UCTV, Uganda Catholic Television.
And all of you joining us through radio stations, through other local diocesan stations picking up the broadcast, or those of you picking up our shortwave radio broadcast. And lastly, to all of you joining us through internet sites and digital platforms throughout the world, welcome to you all.
My name is Francesca Merlo.
And I am Joseph Tulloch, and it is our privilege to be providing the English language commentary for you today. You can see on your screens the Cathedral of Notre de la Garde. It's located on a hill near the old port of Paris. Pope Francis is on the way. Earlier you might have seen his car driving through the city, and he's just on his way here, and we'll get started soon. That's the old port of Marseille, of course, not Paris. Apologies for that.
Marseille, in fact, because Pope Francis is spending the weekend in Marseille, where he is currently undergoing his 44th Apostolic journey abroad. Now it's in the southern French city because he will be attending the concluding session of the Mediterranean meetings.
So these Mediterranean meetings are church-led initiatives which are held annually in a different city or town on the Mediterranean. The first one, I believe, was in Bari in 2020. Then there was a year out because of COVID, and then they did the next one in Florence in 2022, so both in Italy. And this year, for the first time, the meetings are being held outside of Italy, in Marseille. This edition of the meetings have brought together, I think, 70 Catholic bishops and 120 young people, aged from 20 or 25 through to 35, from all over the Mediterranean. So there's people from Italy, from France, but also from the Middle East, from Syria. I know there's a few, and then also from Ukraine. People sometimes forget that some of the southern Slavic countries are on the Mediterranean, but they are on the Black Sea, and so there are people really from all over the Mediterranean area here.
This diversity, of course, also brings people from all different faiths and religions. And for the Holy Father, the visit offers an occasion to promote fraternity, which is a theme that he has emphasized and touched upon so much throughout his pontificate, and in this occasion, especially throughout the Mediterranean, and there's a strong emphasis on migration.
And the Pope is, of course, arriving in Marseille in the middle of the Rugby World Cup 2023, which is being hosted by France. It's a week of intense excitement for the city, which is really bustling. We've heard from some of our Vatican News colleagues who were there on the ground in Marseille that they even had difficulties in finding a taxi. And they also told us that they spoke to their taxi driver and asked him what he thought about Pope Francis coming to the city. And he replied, they said, saying, "We all believe in one God, and anybody who believes in God and works for peace in the Mediterranean, I want to listen to them, and I'm interested in this visit." So that's the view of a taxi driver from Marseille.
Now, the Holy Father has only just landed in Marseille about just over an hour ago, and was greeted at the airport and is now making his way to the Basilica, where we are expected to all join in prayer for a Marian prayer. And after that, he will be traveling close by to a memorial for the migrants and the sailors who died at sea, and we know that there are many of them, where he will pray once more with other religious leaders and hear testimonies from a migrant.
For Cardinal Jean-Marc Aveline, that's the Archbishop of Marseille, one of the major highlights will be the Mass, which Pope Francis is celebrating tomorrow in the Velodrome Stadium. They're expecting, I think, about 50,000 to attend that. That'll be on Saturday afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and the last event of the trip, basically, before the Pope returns to the Vatican. Cardinal Aveline said earlier that he thinks the Mass will, quote, bring together Marseille in all its diversity, and the French President Emmanuel Macron is also expected to be in attendance. You might be able to see on your screens now, if you're following by TV, the Pope's motorcade beginning the ascent up to the cathedral. As I said, it's located on a hill. I think it's 162 or 163 meters high. I've been there once before, actually, and you really have this view over the whole of the old city. Really, really spectacular, really stunning, and just a great setting for this first event of Pope Francis's visit here to Marseille.
The Pope is visiting Marseille, and the last time a Pope visited the city was in 1533, when Clement VII of Florence visited the city to celebrate a marriage. But it is also worth noting that Karol Wojtyla, who later, of course, as we know, became Pope John Paul II, now Saint John Paul II, actually visited the city in 1946 when he was a priest, a young seminarian, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. He actually came, I think, because of an interest in, I think I was reading this, in the worker priest movement, which was kind of taking off in France at the time, and he met with the first of the worker priests, so the worker priests were this movement of priests in France who also worked to earn a living, and the one he met with in Marseille was, or he met either with him or with some of his colleagues, was he worked in the docks. He was a dock worker. Yeah, of course, Marseille is a port city. Shipping is a very important industry here. And it looks like the motorcade is just now arriving to the cathedral. Lots of cars coming. Pope Francis, I believe, is in the white car, which hasn't arrived yet.
Leading up to this event, we've heard from several different church leaders, one of whom the Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who, with regards to the meeting, said that all European countries must take responsibility together for the situation in the Mediterranean, far from slogans and oppositions, having in mind more the faces than the numbers of a complex and dramatic issue. And he is referring, of course, to the issue of migration in the Mediterranean. And the white car in which the Pope is has now arrived just on what I think we can describe as a facade of the Basilica, overlooking all of Marseille. It really is quite high up on a hill, I'd say. Beautiful view.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about this church is so it's dedicated to Our Lady, and it's kind of a point of reference not only for the Catholics in Marseille, but for those of all religions. And so we were hearing something earlier about the Muslims and people of other faiths who live in Marseille and like to come here and entrust themselves to the Virgin Mary. And of course, interfaith relations will be a focus point for this trip, and later on there'll be a meeting with religious leaders of various faiths. For now, of course, the Pope is meeting with the clergy from the Diocese of Marseille. That's the first event on his agenda, but much more to follow after that.
So now, for those of you who cannot see a screen, the Holy Father has got out of the car and he's grinning away. He's always very happy to meet people, faithful and people of other religions around the world, as we know. And we are expecting, first of all, to hear a greeting from the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, who is Jean-Marc Aveline. And now images are being shown of inside the Basilica, as where the faithful are patiently waiting for Pope Francis to arrive.
Yeah, so this church is officially known, as I said, as Notre Dame de la Garde, Our Lady of the Garde, but the locals often refer to it as La Bonne Mère, the Good Mother, and that's because it has historically been a symbol of hope and protection for sailors, for fishermen, and for the people of Marseille. It's one of the most famous buildings in the old city, but of course just a really fitting location for the start of this trip, which is so dedicated to migrants, to refugees, for those people that have had to make this really difficult journey on the sea from their countries of origin, or from North Africa often, even if that's not their country of origin, to Europe.
Now, as we are being shown images of the interior of the church, I think it might be worth noting that it is decorated by more than 1,200 square meters of Byzantine-style mosaics, beautiful marbles, white marble from Carrara in Italy, and red marble from Brignoles, which is in France. And there are about 380 square meters of Roman mosaics laid out in geometric design all over the floors.
There are also, all over the interior, lots of votos, I'm reading, made to the Virgin, especially by sailors. So these are model boats, paintings and plaques, and I think left here in the Basilica to kind of entrust the people who are leaving them to the Virgin Mary, often sailors, as we were saying, maybe about to undertake a bit of a hazardous voyage. And outside the Basilica, there's a famous statue of Saint Veronica wiping the face of Jesus as he carried the cross, and that was constructed in memory of the missionaries who left the cathedral in the 19th and 20th centuries to proclaim the gospel, and they prayed that on their journey they would be protected by Our Lady of the Garde. So those of you who are watching on TV can see some images of the outside of the Basilica right now. It's quite a recent building, actually. It was built in 1853 and completed 11 years later. It's, as Francesca was saying, it's Neo-Byzantine in style, so you can see some of those golden mosaics. They're very, very typical of the Byzantine style. There's also, I'm reading, there's a drawbridge. I'm not sure entirely where that is, but that's quite an interesting architectural feature of this cathedral. We'll see if we can locate the drawbridge at any point in this transmission. So we're just waiting basically for Pope Francis to make his entrance into the cathedral. You can see we've got many of the bishops of the area gathered, as well as some who've come with Pope Francis from the Vatican. You might be able to see there in the front row Cardinal Michael Czerny. He's the prefect of the Vatican's dicastery for promoting integral human development, which is the Vatican office that looks after the Church's social teaching, let's say, and particularly putting it into practice. And one of his main concerns is migrants and refugees. So I think that's why he's here accompanying the Pope on this particular journey. Cardinal Czerny famously had his first pectoral cross made from the wood of a boat that had carried refugees to Lampedusa in Sicily. So Lampedusa is this island where many refugees arrive, and Cardinal Czerny had his first pectoral cross constructed from the wood of those boats. I don't know if that's the same one that he still wears today. It might well be, but anyway, very fitting and very in keeping with the purpose of this journey of Pope Francis to Marseille. So we're going to hear in a few moments from the Cardinal Archbishop of Marseille, that's Jean-Marc Aveline. He's quite a close collaborator of Pope Francis, and he's certainly been the driving force behind this edition of the Mediterranean meetings. I'm not sure, I don't remember now to what extent he was involved with the earlier ones, but certainly he's been collaborating very closely with Pope Francis to organise this one. And this, I can see some movement here now. Perhaps, and here's the Pope. He's being wheeled. Pope Francis, of course, is in a wheelchair due to a knee injury that he's been nursing for a while now, and it looks like he's just being wheeled into the Basilica. And we're about to begin. You can hear the organ, faithful getting to their feet. So Pope Francis just blessing some of the faithful there, and now being brought up the aisle in his wheelchair.
Looks like we have a full house.
Yeah, it really does. So it's not a huge church, but it's very much full to the brim. I think that's Cardinal Aveline there just behind Pope Francis.
They're walking up the aisle together, and Pope Francis is about to get out of his wheelchair and sit on his chair.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we're just narrating that for those of you who are listening over the radio. So we have kind of a white chair that's been placed right in the centre of the church in front of the altar, and I think that's where Pope Francis is. Or perhaps not. Perhaps that's not where he's about to sit. We'll see.
For those of you listening via radio, surely have the pleasure of hearing the choir singing, accompanying the Holy Father's entrance to the Basilica. The Holy Father is blessing a candle, quite a large candle, which is now being positioned behind the altar.
This is a hymn to the Virgin Mary that's being sung, for those of you who don't know French.
The text of this. No, excuse me.
Now we'll hear from Cardinal Aveline. I think perhaps there'll be a brief rite of introduction from the Holy Father just before. So the faithful are just observing a moment of silence here before the start of this Marian prayer, and we can join them in that moment of silence, moment of prayer, before we get started here.
And now the Holy Father is, as we'd imagined before, getting up and sitting in this beautiful white chair at the end of the aisle and in front of the altar.
And that's, for those of you watching on the television, that's Cardinal Aveline, standing just to the Pope's right, and I think he's about to begin his address.
Benvenuto a Marsiglia, Santo Padre.
Welcome to Marseille, Holy Father.
Benvenuto in questa città
Welcome
che non vedeva
to a
l'ora
city
di accoglierla.
that was so eager to welcome you.
Mardi dernier,
Last
il y a quelques
last
jours,
Tuesday,
avant
a
votre
few days
départ,
ago, before your
vous êtes
departure,
allé confier ce voyage,
you entrusted
comme
this
chaque
journey,
fois, à la Vierge
as
Marie,
always, to the
en
Virgin
priant
Mary,
devant l'icône
praying
du
before
Salus
the icon
Populi Romani.
of Mary Salus
Et
Populi Romani.
Aujourd'hui, dès votre arrivée,
And
vous
as
avez
soon as you
voulu faire
arrived,
comme nous faisons ici.
you wanted to do as we
Chaque
do
fois qu'un
here,
événement heureux
every time
ou malheureux
something happy
surgit dans
or
notre
unhappy
existence.
happens in our lives.
Marseillais de toute confession,
People from Marseille,
de toute
of
religion,
all faiths and
nous
religions,
montons sur cette colline
we go up
pour nous
this hill
confier à la Vierge
to
Marie,
entrust ourselves to the
qu'ici
Virgin Mary,
nous appelons la Bonne Mère.
the Virgin of La Garde, whom we here call La Bonne Mère, the Good
Mais il n'y
Mother.
a pas que les Marseillais qui montent à
But
la
it's
Bonne
not
Mère.
just the people of Marseille
Ici,
who go up to the
Saint
Good
Charles
Mother.
de Foucault
Here,
venait
Saint
prier
Charles
à
de
chacun
Foucault
de ses passages
used
à
to come to
Marseille,
pray whenever he
avant
passed through
ou
Marseille,
après ses nombreuses
before or
traversées
after
de la Méditerranée.
his many crossings of the Mediterranean.
Ici,
Here,
la petite Thérèse
the little
de Lisieux,
Thérèse of
en
Lisieux,
pèlerinage vers
on her
Rome,
pilgrimage to
est
Rome,
venue confier à la
came to
Vierge
confide
son
in the
projet de
Virgin
demander au pape
her plan to ask the Pope to
d'entrer au
authorize
Carmel
her to
malgré son
enter the
jeune âge.
Carmelite convent
Ici,
despite her young
la
age.
jeune Mariam,
Here,
originaire
a
de
young Marian,
Palestine,
originally
travaillant
from
à
Palestine
Marseille au service d'une
and working in
famille
Marseille
libanaise,
for a Lebanese
est
family,
venue régulièrement
regularly came
demander
to ask
à
Mary to
Marie
light the way
d'éclairer le
for her
chemin de sa
vocation.
vocation. Ici,
Here,
le jeune
the
abbé
young
polonais
Polish
Karol
priest
Wojtyła,
Karol Wojtyła,
alors qu'il était étudiant
while
à
he was a
Rome,
student in Rome,
vint célébrer
came to
l'Eucharistie
celebrate
juste avant
the
de se
Eucharist
rendre au
just before
presbytère
going
où
to the
vivait Jacques Leuve,
presbytery
ce
where Jacques
dominicain
Leuve,
qui fut le premier prêtre
the Dominican
ouvrier
who
de
was the
France,
first priest worker
embauché comme
priest in
docker
France,
sur le port de
lived
Marseille.
employed as a docker in the
À
port
votre
of Marseille.
tour, soyez le bienvenu, très Saint
You
Père.
too are welcome, Most Holy Father.
Eh oui,
And
ici
Pope Francis
viennent
just
les
saying something
pêcheurs.
back to him that our microphones didn't catch, but
Bienvenue,
smiling
bienvenue.
very broadly.
Les prêtres du
The
diocèse,
priests of the
le
diocese,
diacre permanent et
the
leurs
permanent
épouses,
deacons,
les
and their wives,
séminaristes,
the seminarians,
supérieurs
and
locaux,
all the local
les
superiors
communautés religieuses présentes
of the
à
religious
Marseille
communities present
sont
in Marseille
heureux de
are
pouvoir
delighted
prier
to be
un
able to
moment
pray with
avec
you
vous.
for a
Je
moment.
salue aussi les
I would
recteurs
like to also
des
welcome
sanctuaires
the
mariaux
rectors
du
of the
pourtour méditerranéen
Mediterranean Marian
qui se sont
shrines
réunis ici
who are
cette
here
semaine
today
et qui ont eu à cœur de nous
and
rejoindre
he
ce soir.
who were very keen to join
Ils
us.
savent,
They
et les
know,
prêtres surtout,
especially the
parce que
priests,
c'est leur vocation
because it is
profonde,
their deepest
que nous
vocation,
avons toujours à apprendre de
that we
Marie
always
à
have to
regarder
learn
Dieu
from
avec les
Mary,
yeux du peuple,
to look at God
portant devant lui les
with the
prières
eyes of the
et les
people, bringing
supplications de
before him
tous,
the prayers
et aussi à
and
regarder
supplications
le
of
peuple
all,
avec les yeux de Dieu,
and also to look
des
at
yeux
the
pleins
people
de
with the
bonté,
eyes of God,
d'encouragement
eyes full of
et de
goodness,
miséricorde.
encouragement, and mercy.
Avec vous, très Saint Père,
With you,
avec
Most
tous les
Holy Father,
pèlerins qui depuis plus
with
de
all the
800 ans
pilgrims who, for more
sont
than
montés
800
sur cette
years,
colline
have
pour
climbed this hill
intercéder
to
et
ask
pour
and to give
remercier,
thanks,
comme en attestent
as
les très
attested
nombreux ex-voto
by the many
et les
ex-votos
maquettes
and
bateaux
models of ships
qui ornent ce
which are
sanctuaire.
scattered throughout the shrine.
Comme eux, nous confions
With
ce
them,
soir à
we
la Vierge
entrust to
Marie
the
tous les
Virgin Mary,
habitants des
all the
rivages de la
inhabitants
Méditerranée
of the shores
et
of the
tous ceux,
Mediterranean,
spécialement
and
les
all
migrants
those sailors or
qui
migrants
affrontent
who face
les
the
périls
perils
de la
of the
mer.
sea.
Cher Pape François,
Dear Pope Francis,
on vous a observé.
we've been watching you.
On a vu que chaque
We've
fois que
seen
vous
that
recevez des
every
groupes
time you
ou des
receive groups or
personnes,
individuals,
chaque fois que vous terminez
every
une
time you end an
audience, vous
audience,
dites
you say,
non dimenticate di pregare,
you say,
di
and
pregare
don't
per
forget to pray for me.
me. J'ai
Pope Francis
besoin.
smiles. It looks like he's agreeing there.
Alors, le recteur du
So
sanctuaire,
the rector of the
Père
shrine
Spinoza,
came
a
up
eu l'idée
with the
de
idea
proposer
of
aux
asking
Marseillais
the people
de
of
prier
Marseille
pour vous
to pray for
et que
you
soit déposé
and to
dans
place
un cœur
a
semblable
written
à ceux qui
record
ornent
of some
la
of the prayers in a
basilique,
heart
surtout
similar to
dans
those that
l'Artide,
adorn the walls of this
que soit
basilica.
déposé dans un cœur
It
une
is
trace écrite
this,
de leur nom, de leur prénom, parce qu'ils ont prié pour vous en
and
attendant.
they're going to write their first names and their
C'est
second
ce
name because
cœur
they
que le
prayed for you.
recteur va maintenant vous offrir.
And it is this
C'est un
heart
cadeau
that the
des
rector is now going to offer you.
pour vous, un cadeau de bienvenue,
It's a gift
comme un symbole de leur
from the people of
affection
Marseille to
et
you
de leur reconnaissance.
as a symbol of their affection and gratitude.
Fut le premier au
As you
monde
know,
à
the
être
Diocese of Marseille
consacré au
was the
Sacré-Cœur
first in the world
lors de
to
l'épidémie
be
de
consecrated
peste
to
le
the Sacred
1er
Heart
novembre
during the
1720.
plague
Aujourd'hui,
epidemic,
le cœur que nous
of
allons vous offrir
November
est petit,
1720.
mais quand même.
Today,
Mais surtout,
the heart we are offering you is
comme le
small,
disait Sainte Thérèse de Lisieux,
but as Saint
votre
Therese of
sainte
Lisieux,
préférée,
your favorite saint,
rien n'est petit
used
pour
to
un
say,
grand amour.
nothing is small
Dans
for
ce
a great
cœur,
love.
Il y a tout l'amour des Marseillais pour vous.
In
Grazie, Santo Padre,
these hearts there is all the love of the people of Marseille for you.
questa sera.
Thank you, Most Holy Father, for coming to pray with us this evening. Pope Francis now rising to his feet and embracing Cardinal Aveline. And that's a very nice moment. Very nice to see that. And this is the heart that Cardinal Aveline was speaking of now being presented to the Holy Father. And in that the notes and the names of the people of Marseille, which have been left for him. And Pope Francis now opening with a liturgical greeting.
D'heureuses paroles jaillissent de mon cœur quand je dis mes poèmes pour le roi. Une langue aussi vive que la plume du scribe. Tu es beau comme aucun des enfants de l'homme. La grâce est répandue sur tes lèvres.
We are now hearing Psalm 44. We have heard it with our ears, O God. Our ancestors have told us what you did in their days, in days long ago. With your hand you drove out the nations and planted our ancestors. You crushed the peoples and made our ancestors flourish. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you loved them. You are my King and my God, who decrees victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies, through your name we trample our foes. I put no trust in my bow, my sword does not bring me victory. But you give us victory over our enemies, you put our adversaries to shame. In God we make all our boast all day long, and we will praise your name forever. But now you have rejected and humbled us. You no longer go out with our armies. You made us retreat before the enemy, and our adversaries have plundered us. You gave us up to be devoured like sheep, and have scattered us among the nations. You sold your people for a pittance, gaining nothing from their sale. You have made us a reproach to our neighbors, the scorn and derision of those around us. You have made us a byword among the nations. The peoples shake their heads at us.
Seigneur, prosterne-toi devant.
I live in disgrace all day long, and my face is covered with shame, and the taunts of those who reproach and revile me, because of the enemy who is bent on revenge. All this came upon us, though we had not forgotten you. We had not been false to your covenant. Our hearts had not turned back, our feet had not strayed from your path. But you crushed us and made us a haunt for jackals. You covered us over with deep darkness. If we had forgotten the name of our God or spread out our hands to a foreign god, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered.
Je ferai vivre ton nom pour les âges des âges.
Awake, Lord. Why do you sleep? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? We are brought down to the dust. Our bodies cling to the ground. Rise up and help us. Rescue us because of your unfailing love.
So that was Psalm 44, and we now hear a reading from the
Écoutons la
prophet
parole de Dieu
Zephaniah,
dans le livre du
chapter
prophète
3,
Sophonie.
verses 14 to 17.
Pousse des cris de joie, fille de Sion.
Sing,
Éclate en
daughter Zion.
ovation, Israël.
Shout aloud, Israel.
Réjouis-toi
Be glad
de tout ton
and
cœur.
rejoice with all your heart,
Bondis de joie, fille
daughter
de Jérusalem.
Jerusalem.
Le Seigneur
The Lord
a levé
has
les
taken
sentences
away
qui
your
pesaient
punishment.
sur toi. Il a
He has
écarté
turned back
tes ennemis.
your enemy.
Le roi
The
d'Israël,
Lord, the King of
le
Israel,
Seigneur,
is with you.
est en toi. Tu n'as
Never
plus à
again
craindre
will
le
you
malheur.
fear any harm.
Ce jour-là,
On that day,
on dira à
they will
Jérusalem,
say to Jerusalem,
ne crains pas Sion,
do not fear Zion.
ne laisse pas tes mains
Do not let
défaillir.
your hands hang limp.
Le Seigneur ton Dieu
The
est
Lord
en
your
toi.
God is with you,
C'est lui,
the mighty
le héros
warrior
qui
who
apporte le
saves.
salut.
He will take great delight in
Il
you.
aura en toi sa joie et son allégresse.
In
Il te
his love,
renouvellera
he will
par
no
son
longer
amour.
rebuke you,
Il
but
l'exultera
will
pour
rejoice
toi
over you
et se
with
réjouira
singing.
comme au jour de fête.
And we'll now hear from the Holy Father Pope Francis.
The Holy Father is preparing to read his discourse, putting his glasses on, and being handed his text.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buon après-midi.
Dear brothers and
Sono
sisters,
felice di
bon
iniziare la
après-midi,
mia
good
visita
afternoon.
Condividendo con voi,
I am happy to begin my visit by sharing this moment of prayer with you.
ringrazio il cardinale Jean-Marc Avellin per le parole di benvenuto.
I thank Cardinal Jean-Marc Avellin for his words of welcome,
Monsignore Éric de Moulin-Beaufort, i fratelli
and I
vescovi,
greet His Excellence Archbishop Éric de Moulin-Beaufort,
sacerdoti,
my brothers
diaconi,
bishops, the
seminaristi,
rectors, and all of you, priests, deacons, seminarians, and consecrated men
operate in
and
questa
women.
archidiocesi con generosità e impegno
You who
per
work in this
edificare
archdiocese with generosity and dedication to building a society of encounter with God and neighbor. Thank you for your presence, thank you for your service, and thank you for your prayers.
Marsiglia mi sono accordato ai grandi, a Santa Teresa Gesù Bambino,
In coming to Marseille, I found myself in the company of some of the
tanti
greats,
altri che sono
Saints
venuti
Thérèse of the Child Jesus,
per affidarsi a Notre
Charles de
Dame
Foucault, and John Paul II,
Poniamo
and so many
sotto
others who
il
came here
manto
to entrust
i
themselves to
frutti degli
Notre Dame de la
incontri
Garde.
del Mediterraneo.
We place under her mantle the fruit of the Rencontre Méditerranée together with the expectations and hopes of your hearts.
Nella lettura biblica, il profeta Sofonia ci ha esortato alla gioia.
In the biblical reading, the prophet Zephaniah exhorted us to joy and confidence.
Nostro Dio non è
He
lontano.
reminded us that the Lord our God is not far away, but rather He is here, near us,
È un
in order to
messaggio
save us.
questo che rimanda in un certo senso alla storia di questa basilica.
In a way, this message reminds us of the history of this basilica and what it represents. And in fact, it was not founded in memory of a miracle or a particular apparition, but simply because since the 13th century, the holy people of God have sought and found here, on the hill of La Garde, the presence of the Lord through the eyes of His Holy Mother. That is why, for centuries, the people of Marseille, and especially those who navigate the waves of the Mediterranean, have been coming up here to pray. It was the holy people of God that created this holy place, this holy sanctuary, and it is infallible. Still today, the Bonne Mère brings about for all people a very tender intersection of gazes. The first is that of Jesus, to whom Mary always directs our attention, and whose love is reflected in her eyes.
E il cui amore riflette nei suoi occhi. Dall'altra parte, quelli di tanti uomini e donne di oggi, di ogni età e condizione, che egli raccoglie.
The other is that of countless men and women of all ages and conditions. She gathers them all together and brings them to God, as we recalled at the beginning of this prayer, placing a lighted candle at Our Lady's feet.
E proprio su questo incrocio
Marseille is a veritable meeting point of peoples, and it is precisely on this intersection of gazes that I would like to reflect with you, because it seems to express well the Marian dimension of our ministry. In fact, we priests and consecrated persons and deacons, we are also called to help people sense the gaze of Jesus, and at the same time to bring the gaze of our brothers and sisters to Jesus. In the former, we are bearers of mercy, and in the latter, we are intercessors. The first gaze is that of Jesus, which tenderly caresses all men and women. He looks intently at us from head to toe, not to judge, but to lift up those who are lowly. His gaze is full of the tenderness that shines in Mary's eyes. And we who are called to reflect this gaze are compelled to be humbled, so that in compassion we can make our own the encouraging benevolence of the Good Shepherd. Let us not forget that the style of Jesus is that of closeness, tenderness, and compassion. And just like that, the Good Shepherd who does not reprove the lost sheep, but carries it on his shoulders and celebrates for its return to the fold. The Holy Father is saying that he likes to think that the Lord does not know how to shake his finger at you in disapproval. Brothers and sisters, let us learn from this gaze. Let us not allow a day to pass without remembering when we ourselves have felt it rest upon us. Don't forget closeness, compassion, and tenderness. Let us open the doors